Hello, everyone. Welcome back to part two of our David Bowie ranking. If you missed part one, the link is waiting for you in this video's description where we ranked. We started at our 29th favorite album all the way down to number 11. And in this video, we will be doing our top 10 list along with our 10 favorite non-album tracks. We'll just do a quick reintroduction. With me, I have Frank Deserto. Hello, Frank.
Hello,
And
hello.
Greg Fasolino. How you doing, Greg? Welcome
Hi.
back. If you guys are watching and you want to check out more about Frank and Greg and myself, you can watch the intro for the first video, and there are links for each of our individual projects also in this video's description. We are going to kick it off here with Greg and your number 10 pick, and we're going to work our way all the way to number one. As a reminder, we'll be mentioning our three favorite songs, which will be culminated in individual playlists in the description. Take it away, Greg.
All right. Number 10, the iconic Heroes from 1977. Um, Great album. I feel like Robert Fripp is the star on side A. His guitar work is so inspiring and creative. Side two's instrumental suite is wonderful, but it's for me not quite at the god tier level of the similar suite on side two of Low. Though it does have some wonderful things like Moss Garden, which is so pretty. The album, album ends on a really high note for me with "Secret Life of Arabia." The elegant funk of that song makes great use of the iconic riff from Dillinger's "Cocaine in My Brain," which is a real cult song. Which it has this riff, which later was used in the Jungle Brothers for "What You're Waiting For," and even last year I saw Lal Tolhurst and Budgie live, and Budgie rapped the classic rap from that song. So that's a cool, that song kind of pops up throughout music history as like a little reference point, and I loved it. Whoever it was, whether it was Carlos Alomar, or whoever decided or Bowie himself decided to do a little tribute to that. Um, Not much else to say about it. It's a classic album. Three songs. Number three, Sons of the Silent Age. I love how it's like this Space Oddity style ornate pop. Number two, gotta love the relentless murky energy of Blackout. What an incredible song. And of course, number one, what else can I pick but the title track? We've all heard it a million times, and I never get tired of it. It's utterly grand, timeless anthem. Robert Fripp, it's his single greatest moment as a guitar player. I mean, I'm a Fripp fan. No diss to 21st Century Schizoid Man or Lux Tongue and Aspic, but his guitar playing on the song Heroes is one of the greatest guitar moments in music history, in my opinion. So it's a great album. That's why it sits at number 10. Heroes.
Right on. Well, so here's a tip, everybody. For my number 10, so when you're 15 years old, buy Earthling on CD, right? Put it on repeat and crank it while playing any number of futuristic video games. We're talking Star Fox 64, Star Wars Pod Racer, not the greatest era of Star Wars, but whatever, it's a fun game. Just put on these like racing or flying games and just listen to Earthling, and it's just going to take you to another planet, man. Anyway, Earthling is my number 10, and I really love it. It's a tight, mean, energetic, raw, schizophrenic record that still sounds cool to me. Listen, everyone loves to dump on Earthling because it sounds dated or because it's the one time Bowie is behind the curve or whatever, like the critics like to say. But I no. Listen, here's the deal with Bowie, right? Bowie is a misconception that he's the first to do it. He never has been the first to do it. Everything he's ever done, he's been a couple steps behind, and he's popularized it perhaps, or brought it to mainstream perhaps, or just did it in his own flavor. Like he didn't create soul music. He didn't create krautrock. He didn't create glam rock. So all these things that he did so everyone loves to hate on Earthling while dumping on it for the things that they should also be looking at the rest of his career for. So I think it's unfairly maligned in that way, and I will not stand for it, man. Because if you listen to this album, it rips so hard. Every track on here, even Looking for Satellites, which I know Brett doesn't like, or Law, which is maybe the throwaway techno track of the record, it's just like punch after punch after punch, and these are jams. They're well written. They're really supremely layered. They're composed well. They're clear. They're crisp. They're confident. They're nasty. The band, which I think is maybe he said is his best since the Spiders, and I might argue that as well, is perfect. Mark Platty's here. Everyone, we all kind of put Mark Platty a little down before, but he's the guy who made all the loops on this record. You have Reeves Gabrels doing his freakouts. You have Mike Garson going wow. You have Galen Dorsey, one of her first times actually on a Bowie record, soaring with her background vocals, with her bass playing, with her live kind of serpentine feeling. It's so good. You have Zach Alford from the Furs B-52s just pounding the drums so hard all over this record. I love this era. The live performances from this era, the record itself, it's just invigorated, it's exciting, and it's one of the last times I think Bowie took a really big chance before kind of settling back into singer-songwriter, old man Bowie, folky Bowie, all that, which is all great. We've talked about some, we'll talk about more later. Anyway, this record is so fresh and cool to me. So for me, my favorite tracks, number 3, Dead Man Walking, which is just a ripper of a track. The piano at the end, the Superman riff, the Jimmy Page riff that he gave him for the Superman, he reused on Dead Man Walking, and it's wonderful. It's a really hard rock banger underneath all that electronic veneer. You have 7 Years in Tibet, which Gail's backup vocals on that are great. The I Praise to You, Bowie's the way it just like rips your face off, takes off like a rocket. And Brett, in the last video, you mentioned the Farfisa organ. So cool way to wind down that track. And my favorite track is the anxiety-ridden mess of Battle for Britain, which shouldn't work. It stops, it starts, it stutters, it goes in different places. It's the first time he really embraced his Britishness in a long time on a record, and it works in a lot of ways. And this record works for me in every which way. I don't think there's a dud on it. Love Earthling, number 10.
Number 10 for me, there's 2 albums on my list that have hit me way harder in present day than they ever did in the past. The first one was Never Let Me Down, which was discussed in our previous video, with some polarizing opinions, Greg's and Frank's and mine's, especially Greg's. But 1979's Lodger is my number 10 pick. And, if you would have asked me in 1992 or something, where I would have placed Lodger, it would have been considerably different. Got it through the Ryko CD reissue that came out, and immediately at the time loved Fantastic Voyage, the opening track. And then a lot of the rest of the album just I never could really get into, and it puzzled me a little bit. There is so much crazy stuff going on in this, particularly in the drums and the bass. And I don't know if Frank had mentioned, yeah, Frank mentioned about the new the Visconti mix that he got on a standalone vinyl that came with the box set, New Career in a New Town box set. That listening to that in headphones really opened up this album and gave me an entirely different appreciation for it. Especially, like I said, on the drums and the bass, it just opened that album up so dramatically. Um, just touching on DJ really quickly because I'm not mentioning that in my top 3. Uh, I was playing that on bass yesterday, and I love there's that just little bit, and it's kind of like on Telling Lies where there's that dun 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 where the bass hits the notes in unison with the vocals, and there's this little part on the bass where bum, dum, dum, bum, bum, and it matches the I am what I play in the bass line, and it's so great. I love little touches like that. Um, but and how great is that middle interlude section on DJ? Fantastic. So here we go. Number 3, Look Back in Anger. Dennis Davis, so good. The drums are so incredibly busy on that song, yet it works brilliantly. Especially listen for the bell of the ride cymbal and the hi-hats. It's just so great. Number 2, Boys Keep Swinging. Frank already talked about that. Such a fun song, but nothing will ever unseat Fantastic Voyage. Bowie, I think it's one of Bowie's absolute best vocal performances. So here in 2025, Lodger sits at number 10 for me.
Can I interject real fast just to
Yeah.
say that folks at home really should listen to All the Young Dudes and move on backwards and see how that works out for you? I think I blew Greg's mind with this the other day,
You
playing
did.
All the Young Dudes, but maybe you'll talk about that later. Really cool.
So I'm
All
going
right.
to piggyback off you, Britt, you, Brett, for my number nine, which is Lodger. um, this album does, as evidenced by the way you guys said, you've come to like it more over time. It always has kind of seemed to me to get dismissed as the least of his four albums from that 77 to 80 period. But I've honestly always loved it from the first time I heard it, and I think it's very underrated despite minor flaws. Um, like Frank mentioned, Red Money being a lesser version of Sister Midnight. I like how colorful and weird it is, whereas Heroes, by contrast, is a little more subdued and monochrome. I feel like it has grade A melodic classic Bowie tunes. I'm not going to repeat them, ones you mentioned. Fantastic Voyage, DJ. These great songs. A couple that weren't mentioned yet. I love the chilling repetition with its really dispassionate tone. Over such awful subject matter. I like how it incorporates for the first time in his career world music, like on The Assassin and African Night Flight, which points towards what Eno did a year later on My Life in a Bush of Ghosts with David Byrne. So I really love this album. My number three, Boys Keep Swinging. Love the salacious stomp of this song with a really fantastic guitar solo by Adrian Belew. Number two, for every reason you said, Brett, Look Back in Anger. Everything works in the arrangement of that song. I like you. I love the tribal drums. I love Alamar's slick guitar vamping. I love Eno's horns. I love everything about it. And then my favorite track on the album is actually one of Bowie's most triumphant songs, Red Sails. I think, Frank, you mentioned it. Um, I love how he just yells out Thunder Ocean. It's like it's got this great, tremendous pirate post-punk flavor. Again, amazing guitar by Adrian Belew. I love the fa 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 far away line and close it out. It's just a wonderful song. I feel like it's a really interesting album that I feel more fans should get into. So number nine, Lodger.
Here, here,
Right
here, here.
on.
And I'm going to feel that's the same way for that you do about Lodger. For my number nine, I wish more fans. You both have mentioned it's underrated. The Boot of Suburbia from 1993. It's such an overlooked record. Brett, you alluded to the fact that it was really hard to get a hold of. I got it pretty early on. I didn't have a hard time finding it, but I feel like I'm still getting to know this record. And every time I do, I find something new I love about it. But it's a curious mix. You have Mike Garson's back. You have Ertl Kizelke, who is kind of the reason why maybe Never Let Me Down isn't so great. You have him really kind of owning this record as a musician. We have avant-garde acid jazz. We have art funk pieces. We have mysterious Berlin era tracks, Greg mentioned, that really fit like with Moss Garden. We have throwbacks to Space Oddity and All the Madmen, Brett, which you've mentioned, which had to do. This is a soundtrack, right? It's a soundtrack to a BBC show that was about so it was about a boy's life who was growing up listening to Bowie, and Bowie found himself in that character and decided to just give him a soundtrack instead of, no, you can't use my music. You can use my new music. I'm gonna make new music for you. So the Buddha Suburbia title track throws back to that. You have Strangers When We Meet, which is one of his all-time best songs. We're gonna talk about it later, but it was buried in this record almost. This whole thing is a very personal record for Bowie. I think he's on record for it being one of his favorites, and I have to agree. It's such a really special record, and not a lot of people talk about it. It's so, so special to me. It's dangerous in spots, but it's warm and inviting in others. It's really, really wonderful. Please check this one out. If you like any 90s Bowie, if you can stand anything he did in that era, and if you want an underrated gem, this is really it. And it's always been a favorite. It's my three favorite tracks. I actually like Sex in the Church, Brett. I like Bleed Like a Crazed Dad. Those don't rate for me as my tops. I adore it. This was a really hard one to pick three from. I'm gonna go with Untitled number one as my third favorite. Just the nonsensical joy. Like, what is he saying? I have no idea that one. I love the title track as well. It's my number two. The throwbacks, the hand claps, all that. And then my favorite track on this is the instrumental. It's the South Horizon track. It's really the avant jazz of it. I love it. Everyone talks about Bowie not being a jazz artist until Blackstar, and I think it's bull because you have Aladdin Sane, you have this. He's got jazz all over him. You can't have Mike Garson in your band, not mean the jazz, and that track owns this record for him. Buddha Suburbia, please, fans, check this one out.
All right, number nine for me. I'm going to go in with 2002's Heathen. Um, I think Greg already talked about this. Uh, the covers on this one are probably why this ranks a little bit lesser. And that's I took a trip on a Gemini spaceship. I've been waiting for you. I don't mind those songs. You know, when I listen to the album, it's not like I want to skip them or anything. They're just kind of the lesser tracks for me. Um, I'm on the fence of the Pixies Cactus cover. I think it's a good version of it, but you know, there were some kind of surrounding non-album tracks from this album that I feel like could have probably stepped in. Instead, maybe those will get talked about in the 10 non-album track portion. It's a dark album, but there's some real hopeful moments. Better Future, I think, is a real hopeful track. Everyone Says Hi, I think is really great. I love the line about the big fat dog, always makes me kind of smile. Three favorites on this one. Oh, 5:15, The Angels Have Gone. Like, oh my God, that's such a great track. The second time I saw Bowie was on for Heathen. I think that tour is called the Area One. And I saw it in Irvine, California with Moby. And that was an outstanding show. Second favorite, the closing track, Heathen, The Rays, which is absolutely stunning. But number one, Slip Away. What a chorus. So melodic, so wonderful. Wow. Heathen, number nine.
All right, for number 8, I'm going with Scary Monsters, in which you see Bowie enter the 80s on such a high note. It's darkly urban and vibrant. It really shows that he could hang with the burgeoning arty post-punk bands that were exploding at the time that were all influenced by him. And I think it's really held its weight over that time period, and it's, you know, it still sounds just as good. As far as like if I could make any little critique, I never loved It's No Game number one that much. It's the one low point for me, and I think it's why it took me a little longer to fully appreciate the album. Because I just don't like the screaming part. I just can't. You know, the Japanese voiceover is cool. Robert Fripp's guitar work is cool, but the screamed vocals just I tend to sometimes skip it. I do love It's No Game number two, which is really richly textured and has this cool like spy movie guitar feel. And I actually prefer the early 70s version when it was called Tired of My Life, which we'll talk about later with the non-album tracks. But anyway, I feel like as great as the album is, it would have been improved in my own little weird way, if I would say, if they had removed the first song, started the album with It's No Game number two, just had it as It's No Game, and ended with the outtake Crystal Japan, which I think is a really nice non-album track, which was originally on the album before they added the second, did the second version of It's No Game. So I think if that had been the case, this probably would have gone up a couple of ranks because all the albums in this top 10 are very close together. But as it is, I skip the first song sometimes, so I'm gonna maybe not rank it as high as it might otherwise go. Three songs. Number three, the title track. Love the clattering cacophony, the weird percussion, psychotic guitar, and sometimes somehow with all of that going on, it's still catchy as hell. Number two, Fashion, which might be his best dance rock single, along with maybe Let's Dance. Robert Fripp's guitar work is insane on that song. It's like an enraged bull elephant in outer space. I love it. And then number one is another one of those iconic Bowie songs that I just like, Heroes, that I just never get tired of, which is Ashes to Ashes. It's a perfect song. Just like Heroes, it seems like it sprang fully formed from a deity's mind. You wonder how was it created? Even all these years later, 40 plus years later, I'm still listening to this song and hearing new and different things about it. It's haunting. It's beautiful. I love the reggae undercurrent because yes, I love 70s reggae. Actually, I might have said some bad things about the reggae on tonight, but I love 70s reggae, and you can hear it was a mind blower for me to like realize that he had the drummer do a ska beat underneath, which I never even noticed until I read that, and I was like, oh wow, I'm still hearing new things. The flanged piano riff is genius. It's just all wonderful. The song is just incredible. And I have to mention Chuck Hammer's astonishing guitar architecture, as he called it, which is these really interesting things that are going on in the background that I also never noticed until I read up on the album and was like, oh, that's what that is in the background there. And like I said, 45 years later, I'm still hearing new stuff in this song. And what does that tell you about it being an amazing work of art? So, Scary Monsters.
Piggybacking again. Greg, if you didn't watch one of this video rather, we have had some synergy going on this whole time. This guy and I, man, it's like we're in a band together or something. Anyway, yeah. So what you said about it is all true. So after the experimentation, the Berlin era rather, Bowie wanted to get a little commercial, but he also got self-referential. Greg, you talked about Tired of My Life. He also recycled so much. He brought back Major Tom. He brought let's see, the big is it big Scream Like a Baby, which is a great track buried on side two, is an Astronet song, Ava Cherry, disco flavored, Diamond Dogs era. I Am a Laser, it was called. It got redone for Scary Monsters. It's called Scream Like a Baby, and it rips. Lots of recycled stuff on here. You could talk about Crystal Japan as an outtake that maybe I might agree also should end track two, in the record rather. Also throws back to Berlin. He did re-record Space Oddity as the B-side of Alabama's song. There's a lot of self-referencing going on. I think his ego was hurt a little bit after RCA was like supporting Low and Heroes, but they weren't cranking out the hits the way that Young Americans was. So, Bowie kind of had to come back strong, and he did. And he did throw everything he had at this record. And it's the last record with Dennis Davis and George Murray, but wow, what a run with those guys, right? It's still a wildly experimental record, like Greg said. It has all that post-punk flavor, new wave sounds. Bowie, we'll talk about this in Teenage Wildlife. Brett, you also mentioned the lyric about "Don't look at me, David. I don't know any hallways," right? That lyric about teenage, he just felt like he was being distilled into an influence, and all his idols, all these people were using him as an idol and making more money than him, and he was pretty pissed about it. So Teenage Wildlife kind of delivers on that with a cracking good song that may even throw back to Heroes if you want to get into self-referential territory. There's really lots of great stuff on this record. It's really front-loaded maybe, but I love every second of it. It's flawed. It's a crystalline masterpiece in so many ways, though. And it's a great way to put a cap on the most prolific era in his career. And unfortunately, like we've talked about, people use it as the benchmark of the last great Bowie record. I get it because it's such a great record, but I also disagree because there have been great records since. Anyway, favorite tracks. This is not in my top three, but I want to give a shout out to Ashes to Ashes. Greg, you said it perfectly. I'm just going to say that Gavin loves the song. This was my son, Gavin, who is now 10. I played this for him as a 3 or 4-year-old with the video, and he loves it so much, and he still loves it. And then I sent you guys a video where he's just singing along to it as like a 3-year-old in his little high chair, just singing like "oh, oh, oh," and all the call and response and like all the little things, and like like all the really crazy things Bowie does with his voice on that. And that warms my heart that how much my son loves that song. But it's not in my top three. My top three are Up the Hill Backwards, the manic screech of that song coming out of It's No Game. It's like the blueprint for the downward spiral. And then my second favorite track, which also Nine Inch Nails played with David Bowie, is the Joy Division inspired title track, which just shreds. So cool. Every bit of it, the ow, ow, the way just the chants, the way it just builds and into a giant frenzy at the end. I love. Dripping with Contempt, really a terrifying song. And then really Teenage Wildlife, which is really for such a really great epic rock and roll track, it's scathing. And but I do want to give a shout out to folks at the Teenage Wildlife message board who may or may not watch this later. I spent so much time on that message board in the years between 1998 or so and 2006-7. Met a lot of great friends there. A lot of real passion with those folks. And that song alone is special to me because of that. But it's also just such a great track. And Scary Monsters is a great record. Number 8.
Right on. Number 8 for me, I'm going to go to 1976 for Station to Station. It's pretty amazing to think that just 4 years before this, we had Ziggy Stardust. And I mean, all throughout Bowie's career, just the transformations that would occur sometimes in the same year or within a year, it's pretty remarkable. the musicianship on this album is top notch. I remember when I first got it, I was like, there's only 6 songs on this. But then of course it's a, an awakening when you hear the opening track and it's, over 10 minutes long. Um, but I'm gonna just get right into my three favorites. Wild is the Wind, top notch vocal performance, and that drum fill that takes us into that last minute and a half is just so epic. Station to Station, the opening song. It's such a headphone song, just listening to that train kind of move across the sound stage. Brilliant. But my number one favorite, top tier Bowie track for me is Word on a Wing. That was my favorite song from the second I heard this album, and it's remained that to this day. So in at number 8, Station to Station from 1976.
Okay, number 7, I'm going with The Man Who Sold the World. And it's funny because as a teenager or young person, a Bowie fan, I struggled a bit with this album in my youth. It kind of felt to me back then that like it sort of was like black and white, and compared to like sort of the Technicolor of albums like Ziggy and Aladdin. It just didn't draw me the same way. But now it's just over time, it's just grown on me consistently, more and more and more to the point where this time it shot up so much in my rankings that here it is at number 7. I can honestly say I absolutely love this album now. It's a dark, bleak, surreal blast of pure rock. It's still missing an element of melody and popcraft that he hones on the more acoustic Hunky and Ziggy, where the glam rock formula was more perfected, but it just still works. And you got to give props to Mick Ronson. I feel like he shines throughout this album, and I feel like he's kind of an underrated guitarist in general, because if you think about it, you talk about the pantheon of 70s rock guitar heroes, these guitar gods, and he doesn't usually get mentioned in pop culture in that, and he absolutely belongs there. And I think this is one album where you want a primer on what Mick Ronson does. This is it. His tone is monstrous on Width of a Circle. And I think Frank, you mentioned, he really nails that bluesy proto metal of like contemporaneous bands like Black Sabbath or Led Zeppelin. But then on the other hand, there's other interesting things going on in the album. I love the arty weirdo elements, like the part in After All where he's like, "Oh, by Jingo," it's just so strange, but it works. I mean, I'm a bit burned out on the title track just after hearing the Nirvana version so many times, whatever. But I mean, I still have to admit it's great. So I love this album. 3 songs. Number 3, All the Madmen. I love how eerie it is. I love the bass work and how it builds up into this bolero style end. Number 2, The Superman. Love the apocalyptic intensity of this song, and as you mentioned, Brett, I love the timpani. The way they like to use that timpani in a rock song is so cool. And then my favorite song of all is Black Country Rock, which as people know, I'm a massive T-Rex fan. Mark Bolan, T-Rex, is my favorite musical artist of all time. So it's really cool to hear Bowie do a perfect vocal homage to Bolan on this song. Um, when he does that one trill, like it's like straight out of Bolan, I'm like, yeah, baby. I just love it. And I love Mick Ronson's work on this song. There's this one little lead he does that I cannot ever get out of my head. It's like now, 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 now. It's so cool. It's like, how did you think of that, Mick? Anyway, great album. Man Who Sold the World, number 7.
Well said. Highest for that record, right? Yeah. And this is the highest for this record for my number 7. It's 2002's Heathen. Listen, I'm amiss to mention when this came out and I had met Brett at Project Fest in 2001. I wrote Brett a letter asking what he thought of Heathen, and he still has that letter, which is
I
really sweet.
do.
I would love to see it one day. I can't even imagine what 19, 20-year-old me had to say. But that being said, well, I've alluded to this before. Why I was so excited to talk to you about this, Brett, was because I thought it was like, oh my God, Bowie's back to me. Like I didn't like Hours. I didn't like where he was going with that. So Heathen, I almost skipped it. So the fact that this record came out was a very fresh time in my life. I think I like had a very serious relationship at the time. I was staying at my best friend's place, and we both got it together. And I was doing work for his stepdad, and so we listened to it together. This is the first time I saw Bowie live, and first and only time for that matter was on the Heathen tour. And really, this record's really special to me. I was immediately blown away when I put the disc in and heard those opening trilling guitar loops and the chanting vocals about like in your fear seek only peace, and like the way that really just kind of like just cut through my soul and creeped me out. Bowie was back though, and it feels like people are on board with this one and coming out of the woodwork, and liking Bowie. I think I mentioned this in reality, liking Bowie wasn't an embarrassment anymore. It was cool. I got teased so much for loving him, and but Heathen was the time it felt okay to be like an out and about Bowie fan. But as avant-garde as this record is, it does rip in spots. It rocks hard. You guys have mentioned, you mentioned Cactus. I actually I don't love the Pixies, but I love the Cactus cover. I think it's really cool. I like when the Neil Young cover is awesome. There's certain track, but then what the real meat of the record is the avant-garde, the beautiful tracks, the arty slip away, the beautiful homages, and that. I do love Slow Burn. I think it's a great one that does. Man, it's hard for me to put this album into words. I feel like I'm just like kind of mumbling at this point. So, really, the only lesser spot for this record for me is the Gemini spacecraft cover. But that to me is also a really nice, fun way to give homage to the outsider art musician who Bowie took Ziggy's name from. If you ever listen to the original, it's leagues different than the cover on here. But really, I'm glad Toy had to die so this could live in our hearts. And oof, oh no, I had these aren't my favorite tracks, but Brett, you mentioned Everyone Says Hi. We mentioned Better Future. These are songs like messages to his daughter, messages to God. They're really beautiful. But my three favorites. Okay, cool. Let's get to it. 5:15, The Angels Have Come. The way that drum solo cracks in there just opens the track up, and it just is it Matt Chamberlain? I don't know, but I think it's Matt Chamberlain. The way that drum solo just hits so hard in there. Second favorite, Heathen the Ray, is the horns on that. The way it's so powerful and understated. And that to me also might be, and this track and the opener Sunday, which is my favorite track, is why maybe people compare this to Low, because Sunday builds like a terrifying storm. And it really just gets this really intense part where it just launches, but it also similarly ends. We'll talk about this later. The way Low ends, Low's tracks end, where it's kind of just fades out just as it takes off. And to me, that's why Sunday is my favorite and such a great opening track, and why Heathen still remains a really special record to me.
Right, number seven for me. I think this is the first appearance of this record. We're going with 1977's Low, such an iconic album cover, and an incredibly fascinating piece of work. For those of you who know it, it's, half song, half instrumental. I remember first hearing this, looking at the track listing, and, on the opening side, there's only two songs that break the 3-minute mark. And, at the time, hearing songs like Breaking Glass, What in the World, they felt at the time like I was so fascinated because they felt like these little snippets of songs, and but brilliant. I love this record. The band is on fire, and I love that he chose to open it with this kind of weird rock instrumental called Speed of Life, which is such a fascinating piece. Three favorite songs on this one: Side B's instrumental opener, Warsaw, which is ominous, epic, grand, beautiful. Number two, the opening track, Speed of Life. Um, Wonderful. And then absolute favorite, will never change, already alluded to when I talked about the Blackstar album, with I Can't Give Everything Away. But my absolute favorite song from Low and top tier Bowie song is A New Career in a New Town. I'm not typically a fan of how harmonica can be used in rock and folk music. But here it is wonderful. It's distant, it's bittersweet, and it's the sound of leaving the past behind. Um, I'm so fortunate that I got to hear it on live on his final tour um, for the Reality album. But Low, is such a phenomenal record. It's sitting here at number 7 because it has to be placed somewhere. There we go.
Well said, Brett. Okay, number 6. We come to Bowie's final album, Blackstar, 2015. This album, it stunned me, moved me, challenged, and excited me like no work that he had done since my teenage years. I love jazz, and his transmogrification of it here was revelatory, blending it with art rock and hip hop elements. It just made for a unique album in his catalog of work. It's enigmatic, it's gripping, it's magnificent. It has an eye-opening immediacy to it. It just feels like you're right there with the musicians. Um, Perfect last album to go up for him. Couple of tracks I'll mention that I aren't in my top 3, but I wanted to say I really love how "Girl Loves Me" uses the NADSAT slang from Clockwork Orange. So cool. And as you mentioned, I believe, Brad, I Can't Give Everything Away. What a perfect closing song and coda for his life and career. I agree with you totally. But the 3 songs I'm going to pick, number 3, the title track. Number 2, Dollar Days, which feels like you're floating in a liminal space with him, and you're again, that bring back the immediacy. It just feels like you're there with him. And the number 1, Lazarus, a stunning swan song. I love the how raw it is, both musically and lyrically. It made me cry the first time I heard it. And that haunting sax refrain is just god tier. It's one of my favorite Bowie songs, period. And this album has just gotten, in the 10 years since it was released, it's just gotten better and better to me. I think it's one of his greatest works. So Black Star at number 6.
10 years. Yeah.
Yeah.
Whew, 9. Yeah. Wow. So for my number 6, the highest it's probably appearing here. Yeah, it is. It's 1976's Station to Station. The first album in a massive, brilliant run with what I think is the best collaborators, including Dennis Davis, George Murray, Carlos Alomar, and also Earl Slick, ripping this album to pieces. This album never fails to move and groove me from those opening feedback swells. I was digging for my Kraftwerk records. I had to show one Kraftwerk record. I was like, I can't not, right? Autobahn was a big influence on the churning train aspect of it, and then he was name checked back on Trans Europe Express, kind of cool. Despite it's despite all the things that have been said, this record, I can't believe he got this record done. He was out of his mind. He was paranoid. He was the amount of drugs. It's like I have 2 beers and I can't even stop rambling here on camera with you all, let alone what he was doing in his life at this time. And he put out this whole record that's not only is such a grooving record, but it's also so soulful. It's got so many mysteries, so much religion to it, so much Gnosticism, so much of the occult. It just covers the bases. Like, we talked about Word in a Wing in that way and how beautiful that's like white magic and against the black magic of Station to Station, which is paranoid and insane and, not the side effects of the cocaine, or is it? I don't know. So it's a really great transitional record. It really builds on the hollow melodrama of Diamond Dogs and Young Americans, but it really pushes the soul and funk further on Golden Years. And it adds just a touch more warmth, but it really starts foreshadowing Berlin, which, we're at number 6. I haven't mentioned 2 of the Berlin records. You know where they're going to fit, right? But anyway, I forget who did the originals from a musical that Nina Simone then made kind of her own, and Bowie nailed, in my opinion. It's really a real mood piece and a great way to close this record. My second favorite track is Stay, which should have just been called Slay, because it does. And my favorite track is Station to Station, which is just, Greg, you wanted this to end sooner. I want every bit of it, and I want more and more and more. Yeah, Station to Station, number 6.
Frank, we had a little video glitch there and you froze for a second. Your third pick was Wild as the Wind, was that correct?
Correct. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, Wild as the Wind, which I think is his best cover, done by way of Nina Simone, and really a real great mood piece. Sorry if that didn't come through.
Excellent. All right, number 6 for me. I'm going to go one of the first couple of David Bowie albums that I fell in love with in my younger years, and that is 1969's Space Oddity. Um, I never grow tired of the title track. The opening chord, which is an F major 7 over C, is so typecast as being the Space Oddity chord. So when it appears in anything, my ears immediately, I could be in a grocery store and hearing that chord, and I'm going to be like, that's the Space Oddity chord. I also love um, one of the sections of the song does this parallel shift from an F major chord to an F minor, which just works absolutely brilliant. Very clever chord construction. Herbie Flowers, the bass player, who also then later went on to play the famed bass line to Walk on the Wild Side on the David Bowie produced Transformer album. His parts on Space Oddity, the song itself, are super busy, but yet incredibly tasteful. Um, and, I've always been drawn to albums that center around acoustic guitar and the way acoustic guitar is weaved into kind of rock music, so to speak. And Space Oddity, it's acoustic guitars all over it. Three favorite tracks already been talked about. Wild Eyed Boy from Free Cloud is amazing. The version from the Ziggy movie in that medley is just outstanding. Letter to Hermione is my number two pick. Heartbreaking ballad about the end of a relationship. Kind of that An Occasional Dream is another song on there that's kind of in that same kind of spirit, which is beautiful as well. But my number one, Frank, Greg, you both I think already discussed it. It's always been my favorite is Signet Committee. 9 minutes and 40 seconds of bliss. Bowie has released several epic tracks in his career. And they're all, in my opinion, really brilliant. When you think about Station to Station, Width of a Circle, Sweet Thing, which I'm sure will be getting discussed. There's never a dull moment on those tracks. There's so much going on. They never tire out. Yeah, Signet Committee is my number one on Space Oddity, and overall, that album ranks number 6 for me.
Okay, getting down to the top five.
Yes.
All right, number five, Hunky Dory. Um, it's warm, it's inviting. It feels like you're sitting in his living room with him, listening to him play piano and acoustic guitar in front of you. I happen to be a sucker for 70s piano pop of that era, which this album I think kind of fits with. You know, one of my first childhood music loves before I got into rock music, thanks to Kiss when I was 11, but was Elton John as a kid. I loved Elton John, and I feel like this is kind of like one of those Elton John albums, but with a more subversive edge. And because that resonates with me, I feel like Hunky Dory really hits me in that early 70s singer songwriter with a piano way that feels like musical comfort food for me. I love it. Yes, I understand where Frank was coming from. There's a few slight songs on it, like 8-line poem and Fill Your Heart. But overall, the overall experience to me is just so magical that I can just easily overlook that. Um, as far as three songs, number three, Frankie, I think you mentioned the Bowie Brothers. It's to me that always sounded like a glam Neil Young. I love the enigmatic, surreal lyrics like flashing teeth of brass and hanging out with your dwarf men. Number two, Queen Bitch. As Frank said, it's like a Velvet's pastiche. I love how the chugging raw guitar drive, like some songs a little later, like Suffragette City and Hang On to Yourself, it really prefigures punk rock. And number one, Life on Mars. I mean, Frank, you said so many great things about it. I'll just add that in 1996, I saw the Lars von Trier movie Breaking the Waves, and I went to it by myself that night for whatever reason. No friends were coming with me, and I just remember sitting alone in the theater, and there was the somber scene at the end at sea that was set to Life on Mars. Just made me burst into tears. And before that, I liked the song, but it wasn't one of my favorites. But after that, it became my favorite Bowie song for many years, and still think it's simply one of the best songs ever written. So. Number five, Hunky Dory.
Cool. Well, sorry I put it so low, y'all. Number five, the highest appearance of this record is Blackstar for me. When this record came out, it was such a treat. I loved it immediately, and then 2 days later, it was gone. And 2 days later, I got my Blackstar tattoo, which is my ode to that. I knew I wanted this tattoo the second this logo came out, and then he passed away, and it had to be then. But really, recorded in secret. His life is coming to an end. It's a mysterious, dark, and beautiful parting gift, and so much better than the next day. So I'm glad that this was what we got to um, finish it up. And I find it really hard to talk about this album without anything other than complete awe and total reverence. And I feel that anything I say about it is going to deplete its power. So I'm going to stop. And I'm just going to say my three favorite tracks about this on this one are the title track, Blackstar. I loved the 10-minute epic. It's another one of those, like Brett's mentioned. Throwing back to a little bit of Major Tom, is that his corpse in the video? I don't know. The button-eyed Bowie threw back a bit to Clive Barker for me and some of the Outside era. The really deep love of that dark art, maybe Francis Bacon in a way, those kind of things. Second favorite track, Brett, you mentioned I Can't Give Everything Away. It's like a mix of Earthling drum and bass, but Lowe's harmonica and New Korea, Newtown. Beautiful, moving epitaph. There's a secret Nine Inch Nails remix of that I can't recommend more. It was really beautiful also. And Lazarus, just wow. My favorite track. The way that song unfolds and the way the video where he goes in and out of that box and he's wearing the station outfit. It brings me to tears that was the final thing, the final video Bowie ever did, and the way he masterfully crafted that. And that the way that the ending guitar crunch, that really that just it's one of my favorite things in the history of recorded music. The way that song falls apart at the end, but comes with that guitar hitting so hard. So anyway, again, I don't want to talk much more about it. Blackstar, number 5.
All right, number 5 for me. We're going with 1972 Ziggy Stardust, or The Rise and Fall of Ziggy Stardust and the Spiders from Mars. I mean, this was the first album that my brother bought of Bowie's. It's a landmark album. Deserves all the accolades that it gets, in my opinion. It catapulted Bowie into bigger success. Let's get right into the three favorite tracks. My number 3 is going to be Lady Stardust. Lady Stardust is so dramatic, and I also want, if you're unfamiliar with it's kind of hanging out back there behind me. It's they've been doing these kind of alternate reimagined versions of some of Bowie's albums dating back to Space Oddity and Waiting in the Sky, I think, is the one that has the reimagined track listing. But anyways, on the Rock and Roll Star, there's an alternate version of Lady Stardust where Bowie sings it in a low register, and it's so cool. It just changes the feel of it, and it's so interesting. And it's just fascinating which version will choose to get, when an artist is in the studio and you're dealing with multiple mixes, which one ends up being the immortalized one that makes it to album. But that's such a cool version of it to check out. Second favorite is the killer opening song, 5 Years, with that faded in, just iconic drum beat. But my number 1 favorite from Ziggy Stardust is Starman. Ziggy Stardust, number 5.
All right. Number 4, Aladdin Sane. This used to be, I think, mostly, we would usually come out around number 2 on my list. And frankly, it could still be on any given day. But for right now, I'm putting it at number 4. It's very Stonesy, I feel, but it does the Stones that even better than they do. But it also has so many of those swooning art pop songs that I love the most from him. I think, Frank, you said a lot of the things that I would want to say about it. I'll just add that I feel like his vocals are really on point on this album. The band is on fire. Everything works. Even lesser material like the Stones cover, and I agree with you, Gene Genie, I think is a little overrated, but even the lesser material works within the context of the album, and it's just a wonderful overall piece. So I'm just going to get straight to my 3 songs. Number 3, Drive-In Saturday. Love the saxophone. Classic doo-wop pop. Number 2, Cracked Actor, one of his most viciously sleazy and cool songs, as you noted, Frank. And I think I'm going to pick the same one as number 1 as you did. The title track, Aladdin Sane. Jazzy and mysterious, exquisite lead guitar, and the sublime Mike Garson's piano work on there. So, yeah. Number 4, Aladdin Sane.
Oh yeah. Man, listen, so the next four records that we're going to talk about, any one of these could be number one for me, and any one of them has been number one for a minute. But number four, I'm going to go with Diamond Dogs, which is my favorite of the glam records. And it's also the most maligned. I feel like I read recently, maybe as an all music review, where people were trashing it. It blew my mind. I'm like, what? Diamond Dogs? I know it has the hits like the title track and Rebel Rebel. I know the rest of it's broken, but I mean, we already talked about Lodger and how much I love broken albums. This is a really, really bizarrely transitional, weird record. And there's another one of those records where Bowie kind of had an idea and couldn't do it, so it changed halfway through. He had some disco stuff coming into his mind, but he was trying to do the 1984 musical. And this was a really important record when I got it in seventh grade or so, because I had just read 1984. I was really into all the dark music we've been alluding to. Is getting into the Cure a little bit, the Crow soundtrack, Nine Inch Nails. So as a new Bowie fan, this record really hit me so hard. It was so unsettling, so dramatic, so big. The lyrics really take you on a journey on this album, from the opening howls of Future Legend to the closing passages of Big Brother that are really, that's the one that's most aligned with 1984. This is also everything on this record just gives me chills. Bowie's guitar work. He's the lead guitarist on this record for the first and only time, I think. He had lost Mick Ronson and took the duties on himself. He's not known for being a guitar player, but on this record, he is the nastiness, the chords, the textures, the repetition on it. It's really something. And I think along with like Nico's Marble Index or some early Doors and classical, I mean, we trace this line here, and believe me, this is a boring conversation I don't want to get into here. But this is one of the first goth records, first goth rock records, in my opinion. The darkness really settles in. It's kind of hinted at with like After All. It's hinted at on Minnesota World. It's hinted at on Ziggy and the references to Clockwork Orange. He's definitely got some madness in him, and this is the record where I feel fully comes out. The shadow side really comes to full fruition here. Yeah, he was doing so much stuff at this time too. He's so innovative, producing Lulu, The Stooges, Astronauts that we talked about. Lou himself, Lou Reed, he was doing these giant floor shows and musicals, all while cultivating the habit we've talked about Station to Station. This is where it starts. And satiating his sexual appetite. It's such a vicious album. And it's all those things that are known to be those early Bowie tropes are here on it. I really love this record. So I have a hard time picking favorites because it's perfect. I'm going to try. Number three is Big Brother, the way that kind of comes in with, what is it, trumpet or something like that, just kind of fades in out of the ether and just kind of hits you with this beautiful acoustic rock track. And I kind of consider that to be I know Ever Circling Skeletal Family is the next track, but it's the same track to me, so I'm going to put them together. I love the way the album ends. Second favorite is We Are the Dead, which is the scariest track on the record. It really gets under my skin. The lyrics of it, the way it's soulful, but then it also really just creeps in with just wet decay. The lyrics on that one are really intense. Read them sometime. It's beautiful. And then my favorite on this, and my favorite Bowie track ever, most days, is the Sweet. We're going to call it a whole piece, and we're doing it. Sweet Thing Candidate and Sweet Thing Reprise. And the way that song builds with this picture, this dramatic picture of Hunger City, and then gets into Candidate, where this crack starts sitting in, and there's a bar at the end where I can meet you and my friends, and all these this menace settles into this beauty, and then it comes back with the reprise, but then gets this nastiest, but just the most disgusting guitar tone. It's foul the way that song shreds and rips until it gets into Rebel Rebel. This kind of bleeds right now. It's perfect. I can't listen to Diamond Dogs is so special. And Unfairly Maligned, if that's how you look at it, please listen again. I love it so much. And there it is, number 4.
All right, number 4 for me, which I think is the highest place this album is getting in this feature. Going with Hunky Dory, 1971. Already discussed, more lighthearted, piano-driven than its predecessor, Man Who Sold the World. Hunky Dory, I think, was the absolute necessary album that allowed for the birth of Ziggy Stardust to follow. Changes in Life on Mars are usually the songs that even casual David Bowie fans know. and rightfully so. I think they're both incredible pieces of music. Bowie's vocals on Life on Mars are absolutely outstanding. But the gems on this album for me are really the deep cuts. Um, Kooks is such a lovely song about the birth of his song Duncan. I think Frank might have mentioned Andy Warhol already. That's such a great track. It's an intriguing acoustically led piece. That initial banter and the single acoustic strums that just kind of tickle your ears when you're listening in headphones is just so nice. I don't really feel a weak moment on this album. I like Eight Line Poem. I don't have any issues with that. But I will get to my three favorites. Queen Bitch is my number three. I love how he sings that line. If she says she can't do it, then she can't do it. She don't make false claims. And he kind of laughs while he's singing it and just kind of implying like, oh, it's so obvious. You should all know this that, every time I listen to it, I wait for that line because it just gives me a chuckle. Quicksand, incredible. I live for the harmonic strum after the first, and I ain't got the power anymore. Brilliant. Number one, the Bewley brothers. And so the story goes. I mean, the crazy backing vocals in the outro, very Sid Barrett influenced. Wonderful, wonderful song. Number four for me, Hunky Dory.
Okay. Number three for me, Low. Despite being, one of the Berlin albums and, its initial, at least reputation as being cold, forbidding, and inaccessible, this album just sucked me in on first listen. It was one of the first Bowie albums I think I bought as a teenager, and it has just never been out of my top five. I've always loved it. It has a human warmth and a colorful, subtle energy that for me is maybe less evident on, say, Station to Station or even Heroes. I like how side one has these shorter songs that really make for a easily digestible version of art pop. You could say like the gliding, graceful sound and vision, or as you mentioned, Brett, always crashing in the same car. No, you mentioned New Job in a New Town. Anyway, side two, though, that's the heart of the album for me. Pure bliss. It's an experience for me on the same level as something like Debussy's La Mer, Miles Davis, Ascensure pour l'Échafaud, or The Cure's Carnage Visors. It's one of these long, contemplative, late night listening in the dark, or even, yes, romantic time type of experiences. It's a suite. It's just so exceptionally well designed and orchestrated and sequenced. I just love that. I really like how the lead guitar on this album is always tasteful and interesting. From Ricky Gardner's solo on Always Crashing in the Same Car to Bowie's guitar work himself on Be My Wife. It's an exalted recording and it's rightly revered. I'm going to jump straight to my three. Number three, Subterraneans. It's like an ocean, a womb, a galaxy. It's just the saxophone is a deity unto itself, and then it has these mysterious words like share bride, failing star, Caroline. I have no idea what any of that actually means, but it just hits on a subconscious level. It's just so good. Number two, Be My Wife. I always have found that song charming. And number one, Brett, you talked a little bit about this song, Speed of Life. It's kind of craft worky. I love the Farfisa like fanfare. Carlos Alomar's deceptively beautiful guitar hook. And there's this, I think the greatest part of the song is this sound effect that goes through the song that's like, like it sounds like a train slowing down and then restarting up again and then slowing down, breaking. It's just amazing song. So I love this album. Number three, Low.
Romantic times. I mean, when I listen to the B side of that record,
Well,
I can't move. I can't. It's off the floor. I can't.
you
It's
know,
vigil.
I'm speaking from the 80s. What can I tell you?
Hey, listen. I want a world where that could work. But I'm also going to piggyback with you and go with Low as my number three. So that's why we're going to continue the conversation about it. Really, Greg, you summed it up so well. But really, yeah, Debussy, Holger calls Okay's records with with David Sylvian. There's these pieces of music that are just religious to me, and the B side of Low is religious to me in that way. It's like going to church. The B side of this record is so entrenched in the fabric of my being that I cannot, um, if anybody's talking during it, unless I'm DJing those tracks, zip it. No, it's no, I'm kind of speechless thinking about it. But what I think is really interesting about this record, and I've alluded to it, and you talked about it in different ways, the A side of this record, almost every track, I think it's because of his burnout at the time, or whether maybe it was an experimentation with Brian Eno or whatever it was. Every track, the way it starts, it takes flight, and then before you even get a hang on what's going on, it's just out. It just pieces right out. And it's so great to do that. These art funk grooves, masterly composed. Like Breaking Glass live went on for like 3 minutes, 4 minutes, 5 minutes, much longer than the album version does because it can. But on the record, it's just like you just finally got a hang of what's going on. I drew something off on the carpet. You're like, what? It's yeah, and you're gone. And it's just like it's like the shortest, maybe a minute and 42. A minute, that's insanely short. For such a great Bowie track. It sounds like it's frustrating, right? It sounds like it could be frustrating. This whole thing just seems to do that. What in the World does it. Sound of Vision does it. Be My Life does it. But it's genius. I think that's so great. It's hard not to mention The Idiot. No one's really talked about The Idiot. I think the Berlin trilogy might be the Idiot, this, and Heroes, because neither this or The Idiot were really recorded in Berlin. But those are the records that kind of go together with me in my head as far as the experimentation in the way that. And so this record is, to me, is definitely a sister record of The Idiot. The Idiot was recorded first, but came out after. It's hard not to mention that. It's hard not to mention that this was originally maybe the soundtrack to Manifold Earth, but wasn't. It was that hit Bowie's music was rejected for what the guy from the Mamas and the Papas instead got to do the music. Whatever, but what could have been with the Manifold Earth with this soundtrack. This is a great partnership with Brian Eno. So many great things to say about it that have already been said better by you guys. So we're going to the track. Number 3 for me is also Subterraneans, the chilling labyrinthian way. Greg, you said it best with the lyrics, the way I can feel it so deeply, but have no idea what he's saying is so impressive. Once it's done, similar to the A side, that one just kind of goes back into the hole it came out of. Like it didn't just destroy your soul. Like it went away on the album. My second favorite track is Always Crashing the Same Car, which is a terrifying song. It's about when, Bowie in LA years is basically getting into this altercation and just ramming a car over and over into somebody and just think, just how intense it is. It's the only vocal track that's not a fragment. And I love the synth scribbles on it, the Ricky Gardner guitar solo. And the best part of it is how understated it is until Bowie just lets out this yelp of pain. When and it's the way he just does that. That's so poorly. Sorry for anybody listening. But it's just so much heartbreak in that and so much pain and agony in it. And such a beautiful song that's never fails to give me chills. And my favorite track is Warsaw or Warsaw, however you want to pronounce it. It's the most beautiful piece of music this side of Adagio for strings, which is my favorite classical piece. It destroys me. It has pastoral warmth of German and Polish folk music. Popol Vuh, Slask, who I know he was influenced by. He picked up a folk record and then went home and wrote Warsaw, listening to it. It's both choral, neoclassical, and ambient at the same. It does all the things that I love about avant-garde music in one little piece, and it lives in my soul. So Low, number 3. Even feels low for Low.
All right, number 3 for me, and I think it's the highest placement this one's getting, and that is 1973's Aladdin Sane. From the cover to the songs themselves, stellar. Piano player Mike Garson, really the star of Aladdin Sane. Check out his Playing on Time, or the title track, or Lady Grinning Soul. The first time I ever heard this album, I was always puzzled by Watch That Man, and it's probably the closest maybe to Ziggy Stardust, like a Suffragette City or something on Aladdin Sane. But the vocals are mixed kind of low on that, and that's always kind of puzzled me. But I've just, I still like the song, but I always think of that when I hear it. But 3 favorites on this one: Time, We Should Be On By Now. That, in my early days of David Bowie discovery, that was a constant repeat time. This album, everything is related to a city mainly in the US, but that one was referenced New Orleans. I also want to mention it's not in my top three, but Drive-In Saturday, because it was from inspired by the drive from Seattle to Phoenix. Second favorite, The Prettiest Star. It's such a beautiful ballad with that wonderful little guitar theme. But my number one favorite on this one is the closing track, Lady Grinning Soul. Just amazing performances all around. The nylon string guitar solo, and Mike Garson's like harp-like piano trills. I mean, wow, it's just such a fascinating listen. It's so textured and beautiful. Aladdin Sane, number three.
All right. No, at number two, for all the reasons Frank already discussed, is Diamond Dogs. This album has always been in my top tier of Bowie albums, but in this current playthrough for this ranking video, it made me fall in love with it all over again. It's such an incredible work of art. Each piece on it enhances all of the rest. Um, I mean, yeah, it's all about a sci-fi post-apocalyptic hellscape, but it's still full of beauty. And it's such a unified aesthetic statement that it really sucks you into that decadent Orwellian world. Like Frank mentioned, I love Bowie's raw amateurish guitar tone and his riffs. I love the omnipresent saxophone, like on the stomping title track. I love how it starts to incorporate jazz and disco. I really struggled in pitting this album against Aladdin Sane and trying to rank them, but in the end, well, I felt like Aladdin's highs are maybe even a little higher for me. It had some lesser tracks, whereas this album is just so unified and consistent. And it's one of those albums, like many of Bowie's works, where I just discover more layers each time I play it over the course of decades. I've been listening to this album for 40 plus years, and I just like I mentioned earlier with Ashes to Ashes, I'm still hearing new things in it. Three songs. Number three, For Every Reason Frank Said, We Are the Dead. Number two, Rebel Rebel, Justified classic. Again, I don't get tired of it. And I really want to say I appreciate Alan Parker the guitarist, putting that little extra pizzazz on Bowie's riff. The vibrato, the thing he does where he just kind of goes, wow, that kind of makes the song for me. That the original demo by Bowie, I guess, did not have that. And he added that twang thing that just, I think, makes the song still sound so great, all these years later. And number one, just like Frank, the medley of Sweet Thing, Candidate, and Reprise. It's one of his best ever vocal performances. It's so sad and sensual, and then and then it goes into that, as Frank said, that brutal guitar of the Reprise. What a incredible piece of music and arranging. So number two, Diamond Dogs.
Hell yeah. All right. Number two for me is going to be 1995's Outside, which to me, this is my Ziggy Stardust. This is the record that was new. It came out when my best friend and I were just getting to Bowie, and this is the one that felt like home to me. This is also a character-driven album, and therefore I can equate it to Ziggy Stardust that way. It's the one that I was getting into, darker industrial things. Greg, you mentioned before how it's connected to Twin Peaks, also connected to Francis Bacon, connected to all this art and literature and all these things that I was really devouring as a hungry seventh, eighth grade or something like that. 1980, I was 13, 12. Wow. Knocked me off my socks. The pummel and churn of this record. It also has the most palpable Scott Walker influence. Scott Walker's been, I have a pin here, a record there. He's a favorite of mine, but he's a favorite of David Bowie since they were in the Anthony Newley days, since he was doing the 1967 Duran album. And to see Scott Walker really become a palpable influence while Scott Walker himself was returning with Tilt and making his own brand of terrifying art pop was really great. This album is the perfect balance of menace, drama, experimentation, but it's also campy. It's fun, but it's also sincere. It also feels like there's bits of this that like, this is hilarious. Like, I am Ramona, a stone that I started with no enemies of mine. It's like hilarious, but it works in the fabric of the record, and it shouldn't work on paper, but it does. It really there's a couple funny things with this record. So I dubbed this onto an 8-track. The blank, there was blank 8-tracks back in the day, and I had a couple, and I dubbed this and the Downward Spiral on an 8-track just to see what that sounded like, and it sounded terrible, but it was really kind of a fun experimentation thing to do. Um, yeah, and so that was a big part of Outside for me. Just really kind of messing with this record. Oh, and I took the diaries of Nathan Adler, which were apparently all cut up things he made through his randomizer on the internet, and wrote them all out in a composition notebook. I wish I still had it because that was a way for me to really fall in love with the story, even though the story, this is another one of those records that I've talked about where David Bowie starts with this like this jam. Listen to Leon. There's this leaked Leon suite where there's all these all the weirdest stuff on this record comes from and was chopped up into bits and recycled into it. And that was supposed to be the record. And then I don't know if it was him or Gabrels or somebody was like, we got to write some pop tracks, guys. And so that's where like No Control comes from, Oxford Town, these moments that are really like different, but they still fit in the theme. So it's another of those records where it starts as one thing and goes in another direction, but it really is a special album to me. And I really, really love it. This one was a really hard one to pick favorites from because I adore everything. The title track, Outside, which was a Tin Machine track, Void of Utter Destruction is Beauty, which is terrifying. Oxford Town, which is a giant pop smash. What a catchy chorus used in Starship Troopers, but yeah, what a really big hook. And Filthy Lesson, I'm Deranged. These are soundtrack tracks, one in Seven, one in Lost Highway. Really, really forever perfect Bowie tracks, Bowie singles, some of his best known classics in the latter era for those who pay attention. Okay, but my favorites though, number 3, We Prick You, which is really full of spiders. I think it's one of his most overtly sexual lyrics. Obviously so. I love the churning drum and bass work on that one, the haunting samples, the robotic voices, and so on. Number 2 for me is The Motel, which I really love from the start of this one. I found even more appreciation for it after getting to Scott Walker and the electrician from Night Flights pictured over here. This is Bowie's answer to the electrician, and it almost touches it. I love the way it's terrifying and has the same menace, but then it unfolds into total bliss at the end. Me exposing you and just this big drama and bigness, and I love it. And my favorite track on this, which I don't want to talk 5 minutes about it, but is Strangers When We Meet, the closing track, which almost doesn't have a home on this record. It doesn't have a home on Buddhist Suburbia, but it's still so wonderful. It's a tragically gorgeous song. Some of his best lyrics. I'm with you and I can't go on. No trendy rechauffe. Heel head over. I'm straight. It's everything about it. It's such a really beautiful love song. I get choked up every time I hear it. It's a perfect track. And even if you don't like Outside, because I know it's really large and dense and impenetrable, Strangers We Meet is the calm at the end of the storm and one of his best tracks. Please seek that one out. And that's my 2 bits on Outside.
All right. Number 2 for me, Frank, Outside. I mean, the fact that this is going to turn 30 years old this year is just mind-blowing. I remember going with my dad to buy this on CD the day that it came out. And I'll just never forget that. Hearing Heart's Filthy Lesson when it came out, the music video for it, the great arrangement, production, bass line, after, Black Tie, White Noise, it was just like such a dramatic change, and Bowie went super dark, and I was all in on this. It was the first time I got to see him play live back on I think it was in October of 1995. I was at the show in Phoenix out at Desert Sky Pavilion. My brother and I went, and it was I've talked about this in the past, where during I Have Not Been to Oxford Town, someone in the crowd threw a cup of ice and it just landed on Bowie, and he stopped the song and said, "Would you like me to continue performing? Otherwise, I'll leave." And it was so disrespectful, and it was my first time seeing him for this amazing album, and it was just like, what is happening? We were watching a TV show last night, and there was a kind of a police detective show, and there was a character in there named Baby Grace. And I was just like, immediately thought of Outside. I was just like, could that be a reference to this album and the characters? Um, Such a dark concept album. I mean, Frank, you said, how do you choose favorites on this one? It's incredibly difficult. It's one of those rare, we talked about in some of our past rankings is, I tend to prefer albums that are concise and not overly long. When you're in the CD era, a lot of bands just shifted gears and would try to fill up the CD with music. I think that's been successful in a few accounts. The Cure's Disintegration comes to mind of deserving that much length, but Bowie's outside. There's not a dull moment on this record. Every second is deserved. Um, I hope that we eventually will get some sort of an expanded edition to this with surrounding material. Obviously, Bowie fans know that, this is number one outside. We were supposed to get some subsequent albums in this series that never came to fruition, but I'm sure there's a lot of stuff in the vault that maybe will get released someday. But here we go. Let's just three favorite tracks. The title track, Outside, is just incredible. I feel like Greg may have mentioned that already. But the killer drum fill at the tail end of Leon Takes Us Outside that leads us into Outside. It's just like, man, when I put this album on and that first track is just playing and it's just this kind of like intro piece. And then I just wait for that one false drum fill that, starts. But then when the drum fill starts, and then it just kind of settles into the journey of this album. That's my number three. The Motel, number two. Haunting, creepy. Once again, Scott Walker-ish. It's an amazing track. And Frank, I'm right here with you. Number one is Strangers When We Meet. It's one of my absolute favorite Bowie songs of all time. I'm going to say it again, top tier. This is the definitive version of that song. I love the one on Buddha of Suburbia, but that's like the teenage version of Strangers When We Meet, and this is the full-grown version of that song, and it's absolutely amazing. I think it's um uh I love that it ends the album too, because it kind of ends you out on this, like the album is dark and there's lots of creepiness and stuff. And it ends on this really kind of, I don't want to say positive, but it ends with this really melodic, beautiful, um, for lack of a better word, pop song. And it's just beautiful. And it's the perfect ending to this epic piece of music. There you have it. Number two for me is 1995's Outside. And we're going to swing back around to Greg for number one. But as we always do, I always ask everyone before we start to write down their predictions for each of our number one albums. And it's always fun to do. And sometimes we know quickly if we're wrong as these are revealed. And I know I'm wrong on one account, but Greg, I know I'm right for you because we've been keeping track. But I went with Ziggy Stardust for Greg, and it looks
Well,
like Frank
fellas,
chose Aladdin.
you're right.
Not me,
um,
I chose wrong, but yeah. Woo.
yeah, I mean, it may be the basic choice, but I can't deny the importance of this album in my development as a music fan. What can I say about it? It was life changing. It's a towering achievement. I still remember the very day I bought it. I mean, over there in the corner in a box of my memorabilia is the record store receipt for this day when I bought this album at Second Coming Records in New York City, December 2nd, 1981. I was 16, and along with a couple other important albums, like same day I bought Talk 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 by the Furs and Funhouse by the Stooges. But yeah, this was the one that got me that day when I brought it home. I remember I put it on, and from that heartbeat drum of 5 years, it just ushered in this revelation for me. And all those years later, I've never grown tired of it. It's a unified whole. Each piece, even the lesser songs like Star and Ain't Easy, are to me irreplaceable pieces of the puzzle, and they work together to create the quintessential glam rock mood and statement. I also noted that like it was a gateway for me, or there was a gateway within this album, in that I think I mentioned before how some of the songs from this era really, really were a part of the blueprint for punk rock, particularly "Hang On to Yourself." Now, when I bought this album, I had just gotten into punk rock and alternative music. And the band that, that was my, introduction was the Ramones, who were my favorite band as a teenager. And I think it was really easy to get into this album because I put it on, and here you have "Hang On to Yourself" with, which is basically the blueprint for the first Ramones album. So I feel like, I got into punk rock. I bought this album, and it was the bridge between that and a whole other world of music that awaited me afterwards. So, it's always going to be one of my top 10 albums of all time by any artist, now and forever. I mean, it goes to say it goes to show it was. I'm a guitarist. I have many guitars. The only sticker I've ever allowed to be put on any of my guitars, my very first guitar here is, if you can see, Ziggy right there, along with the Daniel Ash autograph. But I love this album. I'm never going to stop loving it. And that's why it had to go at number one, even if it was the traditional choice. 3 songs. Number 3, Starman. The extraordinary melodic construction of that song always blows me away. Number 2, I have to pick Lady Stardust because, it's about Mark Bolan, and it's the best song ever written about, I think, the best rock star. And it ties into their complicated relationship as friends and rivals. And it always gets me choked up listening to it, that when he says things like, ooh, how I sighed, and really the part where he goes, really quiet, out of sight. It's just so magical. And I love that song. And number 1, my all-time favorite Bowie song, Soul Love. It's perfection. It massages my heart. The way Mick Ronson echoes Bowie's vocal line is just, it's so perfect. One of my all-time favorite songs, period. So, number 1, Ziggy Stardust.
Great call, Greg. Before we get to Frank's, I want to mention, because you brought up about your receipt being in the box over there. For those of you guys watching, I have links, we have links for each of us in the description, but I also want to say, be sure to follow Greg if you can on Instagram or whatever, because he always posts, we mentioned in his introduction in the first video as an archivist, and Greg truly is, because if you're like, what were you doing on May 3rd, 1984? Well, Greg will have a receipt for the 7 inches that he
Yeah.
bought on that day and whatever. And it's so really great to see that level of just meticulousness, and it's so excellent. My friend Dream Pop Jesse, who is a guest on the show sometimes, like he's kind of like that too, and he'll say to me, "Yeah, I remember when you bought Outside, you were wearing about this Bauhaus shirt." I'm like, I don't even remember what I was wearing yesterday. How do you remember that? So I have an appreciation for that archivist mentality, Greg.
Greg's got alibis for days, man.
All right, Frank, I am incorrect on my pick because of the tattoo that I've known you've had. I went with Blackstar, and Greg is saying Low.
All right. Well, it's the sister record to Low, and it's Heroes. And for me, it's been not just my favorite Bowie record, it is my favorite record of all time for over 20 years now, and this has never budged. It's hard to say why, because, like I said, the B-side of Low, I like that better than the B-side of Heroes, if you want to really get into it. But just the way this record works for me, it's the only one that's actually recorded in Berlin, for starters. But the way this works for me, the histrionics, the claustrophobia, the primitive synthesizers, Robert Fripp's perfect guitar playing, which, as you guys have mentioned Heroes, and I'm not going to pick that in my top 3, but did everybody know at home that Robert Fripp didn't even know what he was playing? He walks in, had never heard the track in his life, and just lays down those beautiful tones. And then Bowie was able to do these vocals where he screams, and every time he had the 3 mics set up, and every time he yells, another gated mic opens up, and that's where you get that great distance. Masterfully produced, that track. And there's so many cool things about it. I love tracks like I love Beating the Beast. I love how wild it is, how Joe the Lion and Blackout and those tracks have inspired every icy first wave band, a post-punk band or synth band I've loved, whether it be Wire, Magazine, John Fox. And of course, Night Flights by the Walker Brothers was the answer to Low and Heroes. So much so much music I love has traced back to Heroes, and so many things I love about music are within the grooves of this record. So really, so I love that, we talk about Lowe being the genius of Lowe being Bowie's willingness to experiment and how doing these understated songs. What I love about this is taking his band at the time, his Young Americans band, right? His Young American Station band, and making them play art pop, which making a soul era band playing art, like fractured, dark, art damaged tracks is brilliant. And that's why these tracks swing together and they really work together so well, but they really go so far out in the ether. The B side trades in Lowe's pastoral ambience that brings me to tears, but it still gives me like chills. It sinks into beauty and despair in such a way that really moves me. Sense of doubt, new cone, the our way that track ends with those really, really deep, nasty sax skronks that Bowie's playing. That's bleed out into the abyss. There's some days I think that track should end the record, and there's other days where I need Secret Life of Arabia to bring me out of that mire and pull me out of the muck in that way. You also, God, V2 Schneider, so cool. I have the French single of Heroes kicking around here somewhere that has that as a B-side. Love it. Love V2 Schneider. Love that Kraftwerk reference there. So many great uses of the Oblique Strategies deck, which I showed before. The Eno deck there, where they did so many cool things. I think it was Moss Garden. I don't know. Just it's such a delightfully masterful record, and it never ceases to amaze me. And it will never budge from the number one spot for me. So my three favorite tracks. I already talked about New Cone and the way that song really destroys me. So that's got to be number three. Number two, the blackout, the paranoid delivery of those lyrics. Get me to the doctor. Someone stole. Someone took the chips down, and I'm under Japanese influence, and my honor's at stake. So wild. It's so manic. It's so intense. But also, you have those viola lines, whether it be a synthesizer or an actual viola run through the synth. So cool. And that track is so awesome. And my favorite track on here, I think we've alluded to it. Secret Life of Arabia is such a great, powerful, dramatic disco romp. That is, along with Sweet Thing, my favorite other Bowie track, and it gets my ass moving every time. I love it. And Greg, thank you for telling us about the influences in the threads. I really got to check that out. I love that. Anyway, Heroes, God, so good. Love it so much.
Excellent. All right. Before we get to my number one, I just want to remind you all to check out those links for our playlists that we referenced. Also, stay tuned after because we're going to be going down our 10 favorite non-album tracks. And we already have our next artist that we'll be ranking in production, which we're not going to spoil that yet, but we will be back probably in a month with that next ranking video. But number one for me, what did you guys choose? Frank says Diamond Dogs. Greg says Scary Monsters. Well, Frank, you were correct on this one. You're talking about a record that'll never budge for your number one. Well, this will never be budge. This has been my favorite David Bowie album since the beginning. It was the first one that I ever got. My brother got Ziggy Stardust. I found this at this small, short-lived record store where there was a small magazine rack of, just really cheap records. And I saw this in there for whatever it was, $2, $2.99, bought it. And it's been my favorite Bowie album since that day. Glam, funk, disco, even proto-goth rock masterpiece. I love the juxtaposition of the dark subject matter with the funk and the disco. I love, as already talked about, that David Bowie played most of the guitar on the album, from the dystopian spoken word opening to the hypnotic ending. My opinion, Diamond Dogs is just perfect from beginning to end. Not only is it my favorite David Bowie record, but it's top three favorite albums of all time. Some tracks that I'm not going to mention here because I would talk about every single one of them. Rock and Roll With Me, which I don't think has been talked about, is so great. 1984, I mean, I love it so much. There's an unreleased Audra covers album that was recorded in the mid 2000s, and we did a version of 1984. Maybe someday that'll come to light. Um, for those of you who don't know, Tina Turner recorded a version of 1984 on her Private Dancer album, which is getting some sort of a reissue. It has some anniversary. Um, and yeah, let's get to the three favorite songs. I think we all had the same list. Big Brother is my number three from that glorious opening synth kind of that leads us into the track. We Are the Dead, haunting, creepy, lyrical. One of my absolute favorite David Bowie songs. But my number one favorite, the Sweet Thing Suite, of course. Sweet Thing Candidate, Reprise. Uh, my absolute favorite David Bowie song, as we talked about. I love epic journeys in songs, songs that start in one place and then they feel like it's a road trip that went from Los Angeles to New York, and it never visited the same territory. Um, we'd get a song 16 years later, which is one of my absolute all-time favorite songs. Is 3 Days by Jane's Addiction, which feels like kindred spirit of Sweet Thing. It's an amazing song. If you're unfamiliar with it, it is the centerpiece of this album, and it's just I can't say enough about it. But yeah, number one for me, and it will always be 1974's Diamond Dogs. Okay, so next up is we are going to be ranking our 10 favorite non-album songs, and we're going to limit each ourselves to just a couple sentences for each one. So I want to just define non-album because, like a lot of artists that we cover, there's a lot of material that's not included on the albums. We're talking about B-sides, demos, outtakes, songs from soundtracks, non-album singles, things that appeared on EPs. That's what we're considering in the non-album territory. And let's take it away, Greg, with
All right. First, I just want to mention, since Bowie has such a plethora of amazing B-sides, I'm going to just mention a couple of honorable mentions, which would be My Death, Dodo, We All Go Through, Bombers, Queen of All the Tarts Overture, Crystal Japan, and In the Heat of the Morning. All wonderful tracks. Hurt me a lot to leave them out. But I'm going to start with number 10, No Plan, from the No Plan EP of 2017. It's a Blackstar outtake. It's gentle and wistful, and it really works well for me as a companion piece to that final album.
right on. Frank, number 10.
All right, so since we're doing the honorable mentions, my honorable mentions are Fly from the Reality Era. It's going to be me, Safe in the Sky Life, conversation piece, which I'm only leaving off because we already talked about it 6 times. Nothing to Be Desired, No Plan it, as well. When the Wind Blows, 1917, and Real Cool World, which is a real good time. Anyway, but my number 10 is going to be Velvet Goldmine, which I have here on the Space Oddity reissue single from the Ziggy era. It's a fun, glam, Beatles-esque romp that I first heard on the Ryko Ziggy, and I have on the Bowie Rare, on this single here. The reason why it almost got bumped, and the reason why it's got to be here is because, like Ashes to Ashes, my son Gavin loves this song so much, and he loved it as a 3-4-year-old. And it's just got a special place. It made me fall in love with that song all over again. The ha ha ha, all the really fun stuff in it. Snake It, Take It, Panther Princess, You Must Stay. Velvet Goldmine, number 10.
I'm going to go with just one honorable mention, and
Okay.
because I feel like this one may have gotten forgotten just in the fact that it is a holiday song, but I'm going to go with the David Bowie and Bing Crosby duet of Peace on Earth and Little Drummer Boy, backed with Fantastic Voyage. Um, an absolute Christmas classic. From David Bowie's witty like intro discourse, agents sliding down the chimney, just seeing if you were paying attention. The wonderful arrangement of those two songs blended together, the harmonies, the voices, perfection. Every year, it's a must listen. My number 10 is Absolute Beginners. What a beautiful ballad. It takes about 2 minutes before we finally get into the chorus, but the payoff is absolutely worth it. A definite highlight of Bowie in the 1980s. Absolute Beginners, number 10.
Number 9 for me is the 1977 Heroes outtake Abdul Majid, which was really heavily reworked for the Ryko edition of 1991. I just love how sleek and mysterious it is. It has that cool Cure-like post-punk bass. Awesome track. Yeah.
With him, that's Iman's last name, main name too. Really cool. Number 9 for me is I Can't Read the Earthling recorded version, which I have here on the Is It Any Wonder EP, which was released for Record Store Day. This is all Earthling era outtakes, like re-recordings of Baby Universal and Stay, and it has this fun and this track Nuts, and it's wild. But the I Can't Read version on this, I think I hinted at this with Tin Machine, is I feel worth including because it really is the definitive version of the track. It was put on the Ice Storm soundtrack, which is a really equally devastating movie, and this version is devastating in that way too. It's melancholy. It really delivers on all those things that the Tin Machine track did not, and just makes it really takes it to another level for me. Makes better work of the chorus even, and yeah, beautiful. I Can't Read the Earthling 1997 Ice Storm, whatever you want to call it version.
Number 9 for me, I already said that Diamond Dogs is my favorite album, so of course there's going to be some tracks surrounding Diamond Dogs that are going to make this non-album list. And number 9 for me is the alternate version of Candidate, or the demo version that is listed and on the Ryko edition of Bowie's Diamond Dogs. Ryko just, I probably said that like 10 times in the video so far, and I'm going to be saying it even more. It's a special place also because when my band got signed to Project, our distributor was Ryko. And so I was just like, how cool is that? The label that released all those cool David Bowie reissues is now going to be distributing our album in the store. So this Candidate, which was the album version, which is part of the Sweet Things Suite, which bears no resemblance to this version of it. It shares maybe a couple lyrics. Musically, it's a completely different song, but it's my number 9, the alternate version of Candidate.
For number 8, I am going with No One Calls, the B-side of the Thursday's Child CD single from 1999. It's eerie and sinuous. It's just a superb song, and for my money, it's better than anything on the album proper.
Dang. All right. So for my number 8, I'm going to go with Crystal Japan, which is I have as the B-side for Up the Hill Backwards, but it also exists as its own standalone single. It was made for a sake commercial. It's gorgeous. It's haunting. We've talked about how maybe it should close Scary Monsters. I'm not sure, but I do really love this track. I find it super beautiful. Much has been said about it being a direct influence on Nine Inch Nails' A Warm Place. In the same way that All Saints for an outtake from Low might be a precursor to Eraser. It's really a beautiful track, though, on its own, with its own breathtaking Berlin flavor to it. By way of Japan. Crystal Japan, number 8.
Number 8 for me is an Hours era track, We Shall Go to Town. I have it here on a B-side to the Pretty Things Are Going to Hell single, but I think it's also on Thursday's Child. What a fascinating song. That climbing, slinky bass line, distant sax, it's Twin Peaksy synths, Gabrel's noisy noodling, Bowie's laid-back vocals. I mean, what a shame it was relegated to a B-side because I would have loved for that to have been on Hours. But my number 8 is We Shall Go to Town.
Number 7 for me, Under Pressure, the collaboration with Queen. And it's, what can you say about this song? Everyone knows it. It's epic in every way, and it's actually really deserving of its fame. Under Pressure.
Thank you guys for including all these Hours B-sides, because 1917 is my favorite, and I didn't include it. It's an honorable mention, and I much love to the Hours B-sides. Anyway, my number 7 is I Pray Ole. This is my 3rd copy of Lodger that I've showed tonight. I have 3 copies of this. This is the Ryko, Brett, you mentioned. The Rykos were the ones that I bought too. They were the CDs, the flavor of the town, 94, 95 when I started buying Bowie records. So I Pray Ole is from Lodger. It's Fragments of Berlin. It was finished in the Tin Machine era. I don't know which bits are the Dennis Davis bits and which ones are the Tin Machine Band. I don't really care, though. It's a really pummeling, fun rave up that has always stuck with me and actually snuck up even. I've enjoyed it even more the past couple years, more than ever. I Pray Ole. Can you make it through?
Number 7 for me, I'm going to go back to my Ryko edition of Diamond Dogs with Dodo. Originally or included as a bonus track here. Originally, it was merged with an early version of 1984. It's a non-album favorite and lyrically connects with the original Diamond Dog concept of George Orwell's 1984. Dodo, it's a great track, number 7.
Number 6, I'm going for Velvet Goldmine, the Ziggy outtake, which I first had as a youth on this album called Bowie Rare. I feel like it's one of his classic weird glam pop ditties. You know, everybody knows it, everybody loves it. Velvet Goldmine.
All right. Number 6 for me is the split, not a split, rather, a collaboration track from The Falcon and the Snowman called This Is Not America, done with Pat Metheny, who is really great in his own regard. This track is like the direct follow-up to Tonight, and the thing he did right after that record, and his leagues ahead. It's it's a very prescient track now. I think you'll find lots to it resonates very deeply what's going on, and it's really wonderful. And I really do promise one day I'm going to watch The Falcon and the Snowman, and this is my promise to you all here at home. So This Is Not America, number 6.
Number 6 for me, I'm right there with you, Greg. It's Velvet Goldmine. Here it is, once again, as a bonus track on the Ryko edition of Ziggy Stardust. You can tell I must have broke this case at some point because the green case is not here. But Velvet Goldmine, it's all about the chorus on that song.
Those were so hard to replace. I broke so many of them, and I was like, man, I can't replace those green ones. It's such a bummer. Yeah.
Okay, number 5, Tired of My Life, a 1970 demo that was later adapted into It's No Game. It has a gorgeous folky melody reminiscent of Crosby, Stills, and Nash and Young. I just love it. Tired of My Life, number 5.
All right, number 5 for me is a track from Labyrinth. It's As the World Falls Down. I love all the Labyrinth tracks. Labyrinth to me was my introduction to Bowie, as it is for a lot of people. Some people, it's the only thing they know that he ever did. But of all the tracks on Labyrinth, I love Underground, I love Within You, but As the World Falls Down is the best of them for me. It's a ballad that makes me really believe in love and maybe understand what love is as a kid, even if the relationship between Jareth and Sarah in the movie is maybe a smidge problematic. All the same, though, this song is really special. It's beautiful. I love the cheesy bass line. I love the echoing vocals. I love the sweeping beauty and romance of it. As the World Falls Down. As the World Falls Down, number 5.
Number 5 for me is going to be All the Young Dudes. I have this weird 7-inch, which I got for $5 apparently in 2002. It's backed with bombers, and you didn't hear it from me, which is Dodo, right? All the Young Dudes, famously given to Mott the Hoople by Bowie to revive and kickstart their career. Bowie would play it on that Ziggy tour in a medley with Oh You Pretty Things and Wild Eyed Boy from Free Cloud, and perhaps that is the definitive version, is that live chunk of it on the Ziggy movie. It's so emotional when it kicks in. It's just, yeah, it's epic. And Bowie's version was recorded during the Aladdin Sane sessions, and it's gold too. So number 6, All the Young Dudes, or number 5, sorry.
Okay, number 4 is the song Safe from the Everyone Says Hi CD single of 2002. It's a Heathen outtake. Weirdly enough, Bowie and Visconti had recorded it for the Rugrats movie in 1998, which is kind of weird. This Safe might be my single favorite post-Scary Monsters Bowie song. It absolutely kills me. I cannot believe that this song was not on a studio album or even a single, because it's just, to me, top tier Bowie, period. Not just in terms of non-album songs, but in terms of any songs. It's this really incredible power ballad with fantastic orchestration. It just really moves me, and I find it shocking that it was not more well known. So number 4, Safe.
That one hurt me to leave off. And actually, folks at home, look for the SACD version over the B-side version. There's like an extra whole minute of that song you get out of the SACD version. So good. Anyway, number 4 for me, great pick, Greg. Number 4 for me is the Candidate demo. This is my Ryko edition, Ryko edition of Diamond Dogs, aka Alternative Candidate. It has so little in common with the original track, but it does hail from that 1984 failed musical that didn't come to fruition. I love how ho-hum it is. I love how simple it is. It's melancholy. It's almost kind of a sneeze of a track, but it has so much menace in it. I really love it. I really love all about it. The twinkle piano, the lyrics, the aggressive sexual undertones of it. The alternative candidate is just as good as the regular candidate, which is as good as anything on Diamond Dogs. Forever and ever, amen.
Number 4 for me, I'm also going to go with Under Pressure. We all know it, one of the greatest duets of all time with Bowie and Freddie Mercury of Queen. The dynamic dropout and buildup in that interlude section sets the scene for such an overflowing well of emotion. And yeah, that bass line. Under Pressure, number 4.
Okay, for number 3, I'm going with the song Holy Holy, which again I first heard on this Bowie Rare compilation. It was a 1970 recording, issued as a 71 single, remade in 71 for Ziggy, and then released as a B-side of Diamond Dogs in 74. It's a masterful song, along with Black Country Rock. I think it's his most awesome T-Rex pastiche. I think the second version is far superior to the original.
Which I first heard on the Ryko as well. Another Ryko find. Okay, number 3 for me is the soundtrack version of Cat People, recorded in 1981 with Giorgio Moroder for the sleazy and salacious horror movie of the same name, which is a remake itself. I had to make space for it, even though it's on Let's Dance as well, because I find this version to be superior. I really love it. Has more in common with Scary Monsters than it does with Let's Dance to me. I was obsessed with this version. I love the tribal drumming and the deep crooning mood of it. And then it rips in an early post-punk disco rave up with backup singers, powerful vocals, and just kind of keeps on going till the cows come home with a great groove. And was really great, really masterfully also used in Quentin Tarantino's Inglourious Bastards, maybe even more so than the soundtrack that it came from originally. Cat People putting out fire, or whatever you want to call it.
Number 3 for me, Planet of Dreams, a song that he co-wrote with Gail Ann Dorsey. Bowie released this gem of a song on the 1997 Long Live Tibet compilation. There's a great little nod to Lou Reed's Walk on the Wild Side in the outro with the do-do-do-do-do's. Imagine this and We Shall Go to Town on Ours. That would have been just epic. And if you have the Brilliant Adventures, I think it was called Box Set, it's also on Recall number 5, which is like monstrous 4 records in this little comp here. But Planet of Dreams, if you don't know it, check it out. It is such a hidden gem in the Bowie catalog.
Okay, we're up to number 2. I'm going to echo Brett and go with All the Young Dudes, one of the greatest of all 70s rock anthems. Despite me growing up as a 70s kid and only hearing at that time the Mott version, I strongly prefer Bowie's own take from the Aladdin sessions, which now we can find it everywhere, but at the time you couldn't find it. It was this mysterious thing, and now I can't get enough of his version. So, All the Young Dudes.
Nice. I'm showing my preference towards 80s Bowie soundtrack work and 80s Bowie in general. I feel like maybe I had some of these records higher than you all, but because I have 3 of them on here. But my 4th and for my number 2 is Absolute Beginners, the 8-minute version, please. The big romance and drum of it, all the bongos, all the sax solos, all of it, please. No way. Do not shorten this. What I love about it is it's got that big 1930s, 1940s, big sweeping feelings. It makes me believe and love the same way As the World Falls Down does, but in a more grandiose way, just like the films, as they say. So All the Young Dudes, Absolute Beginners, number 2. Oh, and I'm actually really happy to have heard this live when I saw him. It was actually the centerpiece of the show. Hearing this with Gail Ann Dorsey singing some of those backing vocals. Oh my God, chills.
So good. Number 2 for me, Greg already mentioned it, Holy Holy. I have it here as a B-side to this Diamond Dog single. And my first exposure was on once again, the Ryko version of The Man Who Sold the World with its ominous minor second intervallic intro. Holy Holy, to me, is one of the songs that telegraphs and sets the stage for the goth rock movement at the tail end of the 1970s. Thank you to Ryko once again for that reissue campaign to give us that as a bonus track. It's top tier Bowie for me.
Okay, number 1, and I have to say I am a little surprised I'm the only person who picked this because I feel like it's one of David Bowie's most iconic songs. Is his non-album single from 1972, "John, I'm Only Dancing." rollicking, outrageously catchy, with one of Mick Ronson's most unforgettable lead guitar hooks. To me, this is not only one of his best singles ever, but it's a perfect glam anthem.
And are you going with the sax version or the original
No,
single?
the original version, not the sax version.
Wow. You know, and listen, I want actually John I'm Only Dancing Again has been my preferred version, but I do love that track too. But you know, he has so many great tracks. My number one though, and this is maybe I'm the only one who's putting this as well, but it's by far my favorite Bowie outtake and in my top five tracks he's ever done is Some Are, which is I have collected on the I Select compilation, which came out as part of the Broken Bowie or the Bowie exhibit. But is also the Beast is also in the Ryko Disc Glow, is where I first heard it. And I don't mind having, I usually don't like bonus tracks, but I don't mind hearing that come after Subterraneans, the same way that Secret Life of Arabia takes me out of New Cone. This takes me out of, Samar is gorgeous. The yelping wolves that you hear in the background, the sounds of the snow falling into an abyss. The way I love the way the vocal melody follows the synth and the dirgy piano chords that really start the song off, really cut into my soul. This is similar to the closing tracks of Low for me, as it's a religious experience. And the best part about Some Are, if you haven't heard it, is it builds, it gets scarier and darker and weirder, but it's still and more oppressive, but it never really loses that core beauty. It's still beautiful. Every minute of it is perfect. So Some Are is my favorite. Please seek that one out if you haven't heard it.
My number one favorite Bowie non-album track and my second favorite David Bowie song of all time is Conversation Piece. Collected once again on Space Oddity as a bonus track. This song has always felt like a hidden gem until the last couple of years when it became a namesake for the box set. It got included in the was it the 2019 mix, and it got put into the track listing by Visconti. Um, it's a folky narrative that really captures loneliness. It's an absolute gem. In my brother and I's early musical years, it is a song that it takes me all the way back to us playing coffee shops and open mics, and we did this song for years. I love it. It is amazing, and we talked earlier about the version that was a Heathen B-side that ended up being on the toy, and that's also incredible too. So number one for me is Conversation Piece. All right. Thank you all for watching. We look forward to hearing your own lists, your non-album tracks in the comments. Thanks for watching. Thank you to Frank and Greg for once again participating. This was a great, I mean, what a great way to spend a couple months of listening, culminated in this video here. So thank you guys for participating. And as I mentioned, we'll be back soon with the next artist video, and we'll see you next time.